This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the November 27th edition of the Gateway API Community Sync. As a usual reminder, this meeting is governed by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, boiling down to effectively be nice to one another. So please do be nice to one another. Please use the raise hand feature in Zoom if you want to ask questions or interject at any point so that we can organize those interjections. And it's an open agenda. So right now, I just have a couple of just tell people a little couple things that are coming down the pipeline items that are mine on there. I don't see any other items. We can make this a short meeting, that's fine, but if you have something, please do feel free to drop it on the agenda as we get going. I am going to share my screen. Look good?
Looks good.
All right. Okay, so we'll just get into it then. I don't see anybody that I recognize as new. Everybody here looks recognizable to me. If there is anybody new and you want to introduce yourself, we can give a couple seconds to do that, and then we'll get started on the agenda. Going once, going twice. Sold. Okay. So first thing I just wanted to say was we had an update about conformance profiles at Chicago. If you weren't, there weren't very many people at the talk because it was in the contributor summit, and there was some conflicting, a bunch of different talks at the same time, and it just didn't work out that great. But there's progress on the conformance profiles as a potential separate project that was talked about there, and we're going to do, because of the lack of exposure at KubeCon, we've decided we're going to do a webinar or something to kind of follow up and continue that conversation, mostly pointed at maintainers throughout Kubernetes, Kubernetes 6 members, stuff like that. But if you're not aware, network policy uses our conformance test suite, has been using it for a while, and uses conformance profiles, the experimental test suite, for themselves. So there's some progress from that project actually helping with the conformance profiles project. The UI is still what it is, which is not a UI effectively, and basically just a badge and a link to some YAML. So that's your UI for the moment. There has been interest. I think I would characterize it as there has been interest in a better UI, but there has not been an interested party in making that better UI yet. So we haven't considered making the UI really nice, a blocker for getting to standard with conformance profiles, but it would probably be great if it looked better than it does now. So if you are interested in doing kind of UI and UX stuff for making that look better, and the display layer, there's an open issue for that. I should have linked it. I will after this. And we'd love to have some help with that. There was a, sorry, I'm reading the chat. Did I say performance profiles? I meant to say conformance. If I said
no, I just misheard you when you started talking, and
okay.
I was like, performance profiles.
Performance profiles, the new feature from Gateway API.
New feature.
No, yeah, the performance profiles would be interesting because that's not really the level at which we operate. But so there was several people in the last week or so during KubeCon and just in general that have kind of made mention of concerns about there being fake conformance reports now or in the future. The GEP addresses this by suggesting that we weren't going to do anything about it at first, mainly because we felt like anybody caught doing that would lose so much credibility that it would not be worth doing that because of just how much they would lose credibility in the community. But it's a consistent thing that comes up as feedback and concerns from people. And we do want to support, I'll call them closed source implementations. So to some degree, there is some risk, I guess, that somebody would potentially put in a fake conformance report or one that was mostly fake or partially fake. So we're kind of interested in hearing people's thoughts on what to do. The main suggestion that I've heard thrown out is that we just kind of add a link that says you have to give us a README on how to reproduce, how to deploy your thing and then reproduce this conformance profile report, which is clunky at best. I think it would help to serve the purpose. But in general, if you have some ideas about how we would do that, uh-oh, I'm getting lag. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you fine.
All right, I'm gonna stop my video just out of like a superstition that might help. Okay, so go ahead, Philip.
So I guess and maybe I came into this partway through, but like, what would somebody gain, like, if they're not actually conformant, like having a fake thing saying they're conformant? I mean, I guess
Yeah,
it
that
puts
was
their name on a page or something, but
yeah, that's it. That's what they'd gain. They'd gain some kind of like, I don't know. I'm on the same
but
page
then somebody
basically.
goes to use their stuff and it doesn't work.
Yeah. Like that was the whole
Yeah.
point behind the I think it's still there. I think the comment is still there about like doing this would just be such a reputation damager. Like, that was the exact same point. Is like if they did this, not only would it be a reputation damager in the community, but like you make an even better point. If a user goes in and is like, "You're lying," so I don't know if we really need to do anything about that, but we did hear about it a lot, including at KubeCon. People were very concerned about that. So maybe it wasn't necessarily worth bringing up, but if anybody here is like, actually, I've got some slick ideas about how we could do that or something, just food for thought, I
Something.
guess.
So one thing that is kind of, I think for me, reading the conformance report might be a little tough. So one thing I was thinking of doing for Knative is actually running conformance tests with specific features that I know I want to have on for those things. And that's something I need to start doing. And then I can kind of track like, well, not only is it running, but like, is it flaky as well, right? That's the other thing they don't really get from
Yeah.
these conformance reports. So I guess what I'm saying is it might be useful, to your point, if you did have the steps on reproducing it, that would be useful. And ideally, like if you can do it in kind, that would make it very, very simple for a lot of people. But if it's more complex and your integration doesn't work in kind, then like if you're like a cluster provider or IaaS, then yeah, I would expect repo steps would be useful.
Maybe that's what we should do then. I mean, it's simple. It costs us, almost nothing to just add a field that says just you have to point to a URL somewhere that tells us how to like reproduce this. And
Like it would be cool if
we'll
you
see if
could,
anybody actually does it. Like, if anybody actually follows the steps and like reproduces someone else's implementation.
like it would be cool if someone could contribute a proud job, or like
Yeah.
maintainers contribute their own proud job, so anyone can just say like, hey, I have a new test, let me run it against all the implementations that have contributed a proud job, and that way I can get like early feedback on well, one, I would expect them all to fail initially, but then eventually ideally some of them would still pass.
Yeah. I vaguely remember, I think somebody else suggesting the same thing. Obviously, I think those could be faked, but it's just, there's so many, you can only do so much here. So like if somebody really wants to fake this. Yeah, and to Philip's point. Go ahead, Philip.
I mean, so we do have a closed source thing, solution, and it is something where, because our licensing is less mature than I'd like it to be, we don't have like self-serve licensing. So people wouldn't be able to try and recreate our tests.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
and we want to support, we want to support,
I guess.
yeah,
but
we want to support your ability. Is that okay? So,
oh, we got a new dog and he just jumped at our kid who freaked
Gotcha.
out because the dog's big. Yeah, sorry.
No, your point's very valid. That's like the whole thing with, we do want to support closed source and proprietary implementations. So I don't know. We can think about this some more. I put it on here because these were notes mostly from stuff that had happened around KubeCon, and it just kept coming up. People were very worried about this. And when I say people, I do mean like 7 or 8 people. So it's not like an absolute ton of people. It was like count them on 2 hands kind of people, but it came up a lot. If you have any
Maybe we should
interesting
do a
ideas though, we should.
poll.
Yeah, like how interested, how worried people really are about that.
Yeah.
Okay, I could do that. But in the interest of time, unless anybody has any burning things to say on that topic, I think I maybe actually already mentioned this next thing, that we're talking about standardization. I kind of mentioned it at the beginning because network policy, we did a talk with Surya from network policy and Mattia, I, and myself and Surya, and they're using it over network policy today. So there's still some potential that this would become a standardized tool and maybe even be separate from Gateway API in time if you are working on other projects, and particularly like in Kubernetes SIGs that maybe could use our conformance test suite if it was made even more generic and portable. Let us know. We're kind of considering that as things grow. And then I think I messed this one up. This is actually meant to be here. So yeah, that's it. And then in general, we are, when I say we, at least Mattia and myself, I'm sure others, because a lot of people have participated in conformance profiles, are kind of like, we took the approach of, we talked at the end of KubeCon, we're like, all right, now's the time to start really trying, hopefully getting this thing into standard next summer, if not earlier. So like it's being used enough now, and it seems to be valuable enough that it maybe is time to just kind of tighten everything up. Say, we'll do this for standard. Maybe that won't include a UI, and then hopefully things like a UI follow up as separate gaps, as different iterations on top of it. But the core stuff seems to be working fairly well. If you don't agree with that, we want to hear from you very soon. All right. Anything else on the topic of conformance profiles anybody wants to talk about? Oh, I see hands. Go ahead, Candace.
Well, Boy had his hand up first.
Go ahead, Boy.
Sorry, what do you mean by standard?
Right now it's considered experimental in the get phases.
The conformance.
Conformance profiles, the
Oh, okay.
so,
okay. Sorry. I thought you were talking about something else, so I was a little confused. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, we want more people to report conformance. So saying that the API and like the libraries and stuff like that will be stable is hopefully would help with that a little bit. So go ahead, Candace.
I just wanted to point out I added a link and just asked whether we rolled it out already, or this is a link that describes an issue for conformance reports that Christine Kim had added.
Cool.
And
I
she's
saw
on the call
somebody link
today.
the other issue, so thank you for that. Display. Wait, I clicked the wrong thing. No, I clicked the right thing. Okay, somebody linked it above too. This is what I was talking about earlier, the one that needed to be linked. What did you want to say more about this one? Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that the one that was linked up there was the same one.
Yeah, no, but it just got linked there. That's fine. I'm just what more did you want to say about this? This is kind of the open issue for how we do the display. What did you want to add?
I didn't want to add anything. I just wanted to
Okay.
make sure that it was a part of the discussion, and I hadn't realized that it was already up there. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Roger that. So yeah, they came in, I guess I think it was right before KubeCon, and kind of decided to put the issue together. But as far as I remember, this issue didn't actually have any explicit suggestions. Maybe it had some ideas here. So like tables, page headers. Okay, so there were like some potential suggestions and stuff like that. Again, I feel like we're going to keep asking for it. We're not going to get it with the but if anybody really wants to do UI stuff and like make the website look shiny and stuff like that, this is a good opportunity to do that. And it's low threat because, it's kind of it's just display stuff. So it's not like you have to have a deep understanding of implementations of Gateway API or anything like that. It's just displaying the data that's there. So cool. Yeah, thank you for raising that one again. I don't see any more hands, so we'll move on. This one is just kind of a general call out that there's been lots of discussion. I mean, the discussion's been ongoing for like more than a year, but it definitely felt like during KubeCon, it got a little bit more heated where we were talking a lot about layer 4, layer 3, questions like, does current layer 4 graduate in its current state? You know, UDP and TCP route aren't really different in terms of specification and stuff like that. Those kinds of questions. Questions like, over a year ago, we talked about, would we ever do something like an IP route? Hopefully not with that name. And we talked with Antonio AOJ about that quite a bit. And if these questions are interesting to you, just a note, like if layer 3, layer 4 stuff is interesting to you, there are going to be more conversations about this in the months coming up to Paris. And I know Tim Hawken is particularly interested in talking a little bit more about this. Antonio is. I know Philip's in here. He's interested. If you're doing stuff in this space and you want to be able to use Gateway API for these kinds of things, or if you're currently using TCP route, UDP route, join in the discussions, create discussions. There's a couple of discussions here that you can kind of go take a look at. If there's relevance in there, please add to those discussions, jump in. One of them is, I opened them earlier, but I think, yeah, this one was Sanskar suggesting a way that you could kind of have like matching inside of a TCP route. And then this one from Rob was kind of a follow-up on a longer discussion that he and I had at KubeCon, where, which I think I just kind of mentioned about like them being so identical, UDP and TCP routes being so close. Are there meaningful additional features and stuff that would help to make these differentiate more? So if these things are interesting to you, if you have a lot of users on TCP routes, UDP routes, TLS routes, pipe up, because there's going to be a lot of conversations coming, and we'd love to bring you into the fold so that you can be a part of the ongoing discussion about how this evolves in the coming months and years. I see a hand. Go ahead, Boy.
Yeah, I just want to say that one of Tim's proposals is to see how we can do cluster IP with this. But that throws another kind of interesting angle on it.
Yeah, he did at the his lightning talk, basically dropped the bomb that he fully expects Gateway API to be cluster IP provisioning as a replacement for service. So, but that's always been kind of, I mean, I've been around since basically the beginning of this project, and I always thought that was kind of is North Star the right phrase? Like, it's kind of always been a guiding idea that we've always wanted to be able to do that. And a lot of implementations currently just under the hood use service for gateways. So it makes sense to me. But yeah, that is definitely an evolving conversation where new people are joining in, and like there's a lot of complexity, but there's also a lot of different implementations doing interesting things. Like Philip's working on some stuff related to the egress cap that has been out there. And so we're going to try to bring it all together and start getting some momentum on that, because TCP route and UDP route basically languished for most of this year. Go ahead. I think it was Philip first. Go ahead, Philip.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think it would be worth us exploring, whether to sort of model layers a little bit, like we discussed in in Chicago. Where we could have, a gateway be like an L7 construct, but it could be related to a lower level construct, like a router construct or a, L3, L4 type construct. So I think there's a lot of value in doing that, just because particularly the OCI layers are not perfect, certainly in the like 5 and 6 range. But the other ones really do, like, you encapsulate one thing inside another. And so probably representing it that way, has some real value. And currently also in a lot of, deployments, you do like a load balancer that goes to a ingress, right? So essentially you're doing a layer 4 thing that goes to a layer 7 thing.
Right. We basically closed the place down talking about this. I think what was it, like 4 hours we sat and talked. So we also ended up talking about like Commodore Amigas, but there was a big chunk of it that was this.
It was about 50-50 Amiga.
There was quite a bit of talking about old computers. All right. I'll follow up on this kind of after the meeting, so I'm not just typing live, but definitely something we want to make sure we follow up on. Composable pieces. Instead, like right now, Gateway API is largely layer 7, like by and large, with sprinkles of layer 4 throughout. So having composable APIs that you build up from for the networking stack is something that Kubernetes, one might argue Kubernetes could have benefited from the earlier days, and maybe service wouldn't be quite what it is today if we did. So I think it's a very good conversation to have and follow up on. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, this is maybe for Bowie regarding like the cluster IP stuff, because that's kind of what I was trying to do with routability in a way. But Tim was trying to push it towards the gateway class, which doesn't really make sense to make it portable across implementations. So I'm curious about.
I see. The this might be a long discussion, but one of the issues I think with the routability field was that there wasn't a very precise definition for some of the terms. I think like, you know, the API needs to,
Yeah,
like, where are
that's
you on
fair.
solid ground versus like, if you talk about like cluster IP, like that's on solid ground because that's defined within the system. But if you talk about like internal, external, I think a lot of discussions started being like external to what, internal to what does that mean?
Yeah, I've been trying to just focus on like, for me, what I do need is cluster IP, but then essentially that evolved to routability through the get process. So that's why I'm trying to figure out like, well, it seems like other people care about cluster IP. So then how do I don't necessarily care about the specifics of routability. I do think there is some like, I think cluster IP, you could pull cluster IP out of that and then land it sooner and then focus routability to the class, which would be interesting. Like, I'm trying to reconcile, like, I see this interest now in this functionality. I'm trying to figure out like how to progress it forward, because it seems very right now like, hey, here's a high level, we like this at a high level, but I'm curious how we actually bring, what is it, like rubber to the road and make progress on it.
Yeah.
But I do want to make sure to clarify between two things. There is representing cluster IP services in the Gateway API, because one of the things that we found about the service API object itself is that it has like so many roles, and every combination of the config is like valid and means something different. So that's kind of one of the things we want to fix from a Kubernetes standpoint. And I think, as I understand, the routability proposal was a way for gateways to describe kind of how it's set up from an infrastructure perspective. And that one, it felt like, yes, you could say this one is the IP address that it's like advertising for the in the status is a cluster IP or something like that, versus like not. So those are slightly different. I wonder which one,
I'm having trouble.
you're like mostly interested in, more interested in.
Having trouble trying to take notes on this or capture what
we
you're
have
saying
the
there.
recording, so yeah, I think for me I was really looking for creating gateways that were cluster local, aka they just advertise on a cluster IP. And then it evolved from feedback that, hey, we might want to express these other types of things. And then it got renamed. Eventually it was sort of like, what is the address reachability of the gateway? Then that kind of got renamed to routability. And that's why we ended up also with these other sort of enums for that. Because some people might want to express it. So I can see, like, for example, like I was referring to, gateway class could be for the implementation of specific stuff, but I definitely feel like we do need a standard for cluster IP, you're saying. I don't know if that means we want to say like what the mechanic should be. Like, do we say, hey, there's routability, and one of them is cluster that we know that maps the cluster IP, but then what other knobs we want. Does that make sense? Like that's what I'm trying to just tease out anything else you got, Bowie. So,
No, I
that
see.
you thought about, you know what I mean?
Maybe I should refresh my memory on the gap and maybe we could follow up on Slack or something because I need to.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll
paste
do
this
that.
back in.
Yeah. Okay. What time zone are you in?
I'm in Pacific.
Okay.
California.
Yeah, I'll ping you now in Slack then.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't want to monopolize the time here with.
No,
with
that's
other
okay.
folks.
We probably have the time given the agenda, but if you could, I guess I think there are probably more parties interested. So if you could just make sure that whatever that conversation evolves into kind of makes its way out into a discussion or something, we'd appreciate it. But sounds good, sounds productive. I know that you've been feeling a little stuck on that routability gap one, so let us know, reach out to us if we're getting back from Thanksgiving and stuff. Like if you're rearing to go on that, let us know if there are ways in which we can help keep you moving forward.
Yeah, no worries.
All right. I don't see any other hands, so I'll assume it's safe to move on. But this area of discussion is probably going to have a lot more discussion in the coming months, so stay tuned. Dave, you wanted to talk about better testing of Kate service endpoint slice variants.
Yeah, I created this issue a while ago, and someone assigned themselves to it, but I think it was scaling out, so I realized that there hasn't been progress on it. So I think this one's important. Like we essentially want to know, excuse me, what type, because I guess there's a different variants for a Kubernetes service. There's headless ones, there's headless ones with, or I guess there's ones without selectors, but you can then manage your own endpoints. There's ones that are, I guess I have it here, with selector, but endpoint slice mirroring disabled. You have headless services where then you can manage your own endpoints. I think there's a separate issue with qualified domain name being under specified. So that I think that's going to be deprecated in Kubernetes, but generally we are testing, I think, just like the first list service with selector for all our end-to-end tests in conformance. And I'm kind of curious about adding support for more. Yeah, and external name's another one too. In our end-to-end test to kind of show, hey, we know that these implementations work to send back into these services of this variant or this type. One thing I'm kind of curious of is what should be core off the bat, because for example, endpoint slices has been around for, I think, since 1.22, so it's been 2 years, maybe more. If we add a conformance test for that, should that be in core and stuff like that? Because I know, for example, Contour is just added endpoint slice support, so it didn't have it before, even though it was outstanding at. So I kind of even have in the meeting notes like a rough survey of like, is there some implementation they don't implement right away, and so forth and so forth.
So does it mostly boil down to you want to make sure people are handling endpoint slices?
That's one. And technically, if the endpoint slice mirroring is disabled, I think that's mirroring from endpoint slices to endpoints. So I think like in theory, you should just be supporting endpoints and it should all work. And then like how Costa mentioned, you have there's also different types that we should make a decision on. Like if external names, what do we do for that? That's sort of like a DNS, like a DNS record in a way. And endpoint slices also has, I know like that's disabled in some implementations as being unsecure. And there's also endpoint slices has like a fully qualified domain name type that's like deprecated. I've been trying to like poke that. That's an issue. Let me actually find it. To like get the Kate's community to make a call. on either like, hey, we support it as an equivalent to external name. Here, you can post it in the notes.
I mean, we basically say service as backend ref, or yeah, you know what I mean. But the service is kind of the core, so it would make sense to make sure that there is some like to have a known way of using it, and trying to have conformance tests that kind of prove that people are using it that way makes some sense, you know. But it definitely does get interesting with things like external name. So
I guess I'm not saying we add support
nah,
for
yeah,
the
we
external
don't
name,
probably add that one,
but
but
like
I
the,
get what you're saying.
yeah. So
I think just off the cuff, without thinking about it too much, and obviously more conversation needs to happen. I think I remember this one, and like I was like, yeah, that makes sense to me. I guess it would need somebody to prioritize putting the effort into it.
yeah, so this is for me to just surface. Is anyone interested in doing this? Otherwise, I will do this. But it's also good to get some input from implementers on like, hey, do you need some grace period to import slice support? Does anyone have opinions on endpoint slices with different types, the fully qualified domain name? That issue I just linked to the notes, like has people posting use cases, but
So
kind of just
Costin raised his hand. He has volunteered to take this one, right, Costin?
sort of.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So Istio has support for endpoints. I think most people have support for endpoint slices in the normal form, but endpoint slices that have host names, that's a very complicated thing that probably each implementation has different things. Even for service kind external name, I saw some implementations that actually support it. Istio has some support, but it's different from everyone else.
Yeah.
I think it would be very good to have to start an issue at least to specify how we want to deal with everything that has an external name. In the past, we had a proposal to have a proper CR, just like we have service import, I believe, to have one for external names. And I think it was just a matter of, it's not a priority for now. But yeah, I think it's very important to agree that it's important to also support things outside of Kubernetes and pick one of them because it's not really very complicated from API perspective. It's just a matter of bike shedding how we want to represent it. Do we want to just say we support service external name in service and be done with that, or do you want to define a separate resource? And I'll be very happy to help because I'm actually working on something very close to that. So
okay, that sounds good.
One thing I can do. Sorry, one thing I can do is I can turn this into an epic and then split out each sort of variant, and then we can do. Some of them will be like very obvious, like service with selector. I think the ones you're talking about, Costin, with the external name and fully qualified, will be like another. Will need its own discussion that might not.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like
it's complicated enough. It's far
yeah.
very different from regular selectors. Yes.
Yeah, I don't want to block these other tests on external names, so
yeah,
I'll do that as an action item.
Okay, that seems good. I don't think there's any problem with creating a couple like different, like an epic like where it's like collecting a few different issues. I do think that laser focusing on the most obvious one at the top of the list and like putting a lot of effort into getting to the test for that would be good. Obviously, we're V1 already, so we kind of missed the opportunity to do this before V1. But sooner is better than later if we end up having anybody who's wildly variant. So cool. Thank you for raising this one again. Appreciate you and Costin both having thoughts and like some effort and energy to put towards it. Seems valuable. If anybody else is interested, that's issue number 1718. Okay. And then was there anything else you wanted to say on this one, Dave? It looks like you have somebody put like I don't know if you put this, but there's like a related issue.
I put that in, so if to kind of see the discussion about the fully qualified domain name, because it was a surprise to a bunch of folks that if you do that, it shows up as a CNAME record in core DNS,
Indeed.
like external name, like service type external name does. So people didn't know, and I thought that was a defined semantic, and then people are like, well, we didn't say it was, let's remove it. So, but there's some use cases for it. But maybe that use case can be then like a gateway thing now, potentially. People want to have like if you go to the last comment there, the issue or on that issue, especially someone looking to have like clusters at the edge that then route traffic to other clusters.
Makes
I don't
sense.
know how common that is, but they're using endpoint slices fully qualified for that. I don't know if there's an equivalent for that for gateway. But maybe
Indeed,
that
very
would replace the need for this. So
okay. I have some catching up to do on this issue. Thank you for sharing that one as well.
Hi, everybody, by the way. Sorry to be late.
Welcome, Nick.
Yeah, I think as long as we all keep in mind the external name risks and the risks of using DNS names for routing, then it's fine. But there are significant risks to using DNS names for routing.
Indeed.
And just those
like
risks.
like the entire internet.
Yeah, totally. But like it's even worse in a cluster where it's way easier to manipulate the DNS with an external name service than it is in other places. And that's the point I was making. I'm not saying I want to talk any more about it now. I'm just saying like we need to just remember that. That's all.
Sounds good. I don't see any other hands up. Give it a second. Any other talking about those conformance tests? Go ahead and take it away, Costin. You wanted to talk about telemetry.
Yeah, just a brief question to figure out what people think about this. In Istio, we have 1 or 2 or 3 APIs for telemetry, and there have been some efforts to make them V1 to standardize and so forth, mark them as stable. And I've been trying to push back on Istio having a V1 telemetry API with the argument that OpenTelemetry is also working on a configuration format and specifications for telemetry, and having a policy that specifies that for this particular attachment point, whatever it is, I want access logs, I want traces or 5%, would be something that is not Istio specific and will be beneficial for each vendor to define its own, its own CRD. But at the same time, OpenTelemetry doesn't seem to be very interested in CRDs and Kubernetes. They are busy with specifying they have other priorities for now. And in the Gateway working group, I haven't seen any discussions, or maybe I missed them. So I'm trying to get feedback from other people what they think about it and what they are doing around telemetry.
Is it a situation where they would be interested if they had someone to champion it within that project? Is it a situation where it's like, it seems like they're not necessarily too interested in doing stuff in Kubernetes, but really it's just they would be if they had somebody come in and help drive that? I
opened a discussion. I mean, their point was that right now they are trying to standardize the configuration format in general as a JSON schema for the collector. They believe it's a good idea, but one thing at a time. I mean, they are trying to make progress, and it's a bandwidth. And I've been volunteering to do some work and volunteering other people to get involved in the OpenTelemetry, because I think that's probably the right forum for defining a CRD or policies for telemetry. But the second best place would be the Gateway API, even if it's it would be specific in a way to gateways, while the telemetry specification will be for any workload. At least it will not be Istio, which is kind of the worst place from my perspective.
So just to clarify, there's some need for declaring intent of like configuration for telemetry within Istio. And
yes,
OpenTelemetry is not currently serving that need, but might in the future. And so there's a potential conflict with that in Istio's potential attempt to have their own telemetry APIs right now. but you're wondering if maybe it would be better to move it into Gateway API and like have gateway specific or gateway related telemetry resources. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, and it's probably a combination of both OpenTelemetry and Gateway, because OpenTelemetry will be focused on saying I want tracing, or I want access logs, or I want something for a particular workload, or for a particular collector. But if I define a gateway, gateway is not really a pod or something concrete. It's something that will be provisioned. And I would want to express that, hey, for this gateway, I want access log enable or disable. I want tracing at 5%. We do have this API in Istio. We had it for a long time. It has been in beta, and the question is, what is the progression of this API?
It does seem like, I mean, I'm not saying it's not relevant to everyone, but it does seem like Gamma people in particular may be interested in such a thing. I'm having a hard time
Pretty sure.
personally
that
like thinking we would. Sorry, I'm having a hard time personally thinking that we would add telemetry APIs to Gateway API, but I try to remain open to the suggestion.
I'm pretty sure that Keith and some of the other folks who are involved in SMI and Open Service Mesh have some feelings about attempting to define common telemetry standards.
I'm sure they do.
It was something that we intentionally.
Oh, hey, Mike.
Hi. Yeah. So I definitely like so telemetry in Gamma was something that we discussed as a thing that we want to have that we are explicitly punting on because we hoped open telemetry would solve it. I would love for the like final state of this to be open telemetry owns standard CRDs. And I think it's at least worth exploring whether if we can direct some development energy to like help facilitate them building their own CRDs around like once, because it seems like they are focusing more on like the JSON API and spec and stuff like that. If we can help them out on the CRD end, I think that would be potentially a really good path forward. Yeah, Shane.
Yeah, that sounds good. But the thought that started brewing here for me is Gamma already feels a little stretched thin in terms of like the people's effort and stuff like that. We're still not, I mean, we're never as far as we'd like to be in any project ever, but we're still, we've got to kind of buckle down. We talked about this at the last Gamma meeting. We've got to buckle down and really talk about what we're going to do to get out of experimental. This is a scope add, although it does seem more pertinent potentially to service mesh, would probably dilute that quite a bit. So it might be something like, I don't know what you're thinking in terms of timeline, Costin, but my instinct is telling me maybe for much further down the road, but right now it would be potentially disruptive to a growing list of like 16 gaps already sitting around. Like it's just, there's a lot of stuff going on. I'm not sure. But if everybody wants it, like if there's a bunch of implementations like, yes, I want to do that, then I guess, go ahead, Costin.
Yeah, no, I want to clarify. I mean, of course, we'll probably do it anyway. I mean, we'll have our vendor-specific APIs. It's we already have it. We'll promote it to V1. Gamma is actually not the right place because that's the one place where OpenTelemetry does have decent specification or enough specification, about how a workload, where it should send the telemetry, how collector is going to process it, what. So this is kind of taken care by OpenTelemetry, not with CRDs, but still, I mean, it's not ideal, but it's still something. Gateway is special because, we are provisioning a real gateway, maybe outside of the cluster, and there is no good way to specify the intent about how to do, access logs or traces. I completely understand, the priorities is not, it's just want to start the discussion, see if other people have interest, not necessarily to do it tomorrow.
That is not me trying to shut it down either. That is me trying to like add what I think is a healthy dose of realism into the situation. But if you want to drive this, if this is what drives you right now and you really want to focus on this, I think the next best step is to literally create a GitHub discussion and kind of keep pulling people in. It sounds like there's some interest and there's definitely people that will have thoughts and input. But like an async, collect people's input over the course of a few weeks maybe might be the next best step.
Yep, sounds reasonable. I'll do this if the discussion with OpenTelemetry don't yield result, because I'm hoping still that they will take it and it's really their job.
Sounds good. And when you create the discussion, it would probably be helpful if you could, maybe you were already going to do this, but add the links to the discussion with, like, add all the context about OpenTelemetry, obviously, so people can kind of understand that connection. Because I didn't really know what was going on in OpenTelemetry world, so it's enlightening to me, for me to some degree. Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, just Costin, feel free to pull me into any discussions you have with OpenTelemetry folks, or if you have like threads to link there, I'd be happy to like help try to facilitate movement in that space too.
Okay, thank you.
Very cool. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to stop the share. We'll give a couple seconds. We're at the end of the agenda. Give a couple seconds for anybody who has a last minute thing they want to say. Otherwise, we will end 10 minutes early. Cheers and have a good rest of your day. Go ahead.
Well,
just in time.
So this OpenTelemetry thing, I'm sorry, it's been just percolating here. So I know, like, we're using OpenTelemetry. Is the idea to have it, like, be standard that gateways would use OpenTelemetry for telemetry streaming?
My
Not
understanding was that you wanted to have 8. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, the idea is there will be a standard way to specify when I create a gateway, that gateway should generate access log or should not generate access log or should generate 5% access log, and same for tracing and what kind of telemetry to generate. Not necessarily to standardize an OpenTelemetry. This is happening regardless. I don't think, there's no point in discussing this, but just the details about the behavior of the intent of the user about the gateway and the routes that they are creating. So for example, for a route that is, memcache or something, I don't want to generate access log, but for admin, I want to generate access log, this kind of stuff.
And it would become something that is not part of the core, but part of the extended functionality with conformance tests?
Of course. I mean, if like backend policy and TLS policy and other things that are optional.
Okay. Is there?
Yeah, I'd like to see more in the,
I'm sorry,
discussion about it. Sorry, you go, Phil.
Well, was there a link to more about this?
He's going to create a discussion.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Istio telemetry
in
API is a good example. It's a good starting point. If you look at Istio telemetry API, you can figure out what we support today, and the subset of it probably is appropriate for us.
Roger that. We look forward to the discussion. Cool. Yeah. And if you wouldn't mind posting it also in the notes after you post that, probably be helpful for people who aren't subscribed to everything. Any other last minute things before we adjourn? Let's adjourn.
Bye.
Cheers, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Have a good week.
You too.
Take care.